Hey there, welcome to another Q&A session here with the Growth Marriage. Today's conversation, I think, is one of the most important conversations you can have. I think there's a lot of people who are stuck with this problem. They're frustrated in their relationship. They feel alone. And hopefully what I shared with you today will help you to restore some trust, maybe forgive your partner or receive forgiveness. But let's start with just dive right in with the question. So this person, I believe it's a wife, submitting a question. She's dealing with an issue with her husband. She says, "My partner and I have been through a lot in the last 2 decades. He has had tremendous emotional outbursts that usually come out of nowhere, and a lot of times they catch me off guard. Over the years, I got good at being guarded. I put up emotional walls to protect myself, which everybody will do if you have an emotionally volatile partner. You will become more guarded. You'll keep your partner at arm's length. So that's a natural reaction. We recently had a big blowout fight, and I told him that I couldn't take it anymore. I gave him 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live. He didn't want to move, so I told him that I would move. He begged me to give him one more chance. He promised he would do whatever he had to do to change his behaviors. He ended up finally going to therapy. He has since made tremendous progress once he started going to therapy and has apologized many, many, many times for the damage that he caused me personally and to our relationship. So that's great that he's taken some responsibility, seen some progress. If you hear my baby in the background, I apologize. I no longer have an office because we are between homes. So this is just real life right now. You might hear my wife too, giggling. Anyway. So he's made tremendous progress, took some responsibility, and that's awesome. The problem now is that I still don't 100% trust that the change is for good. My defensive walls are still up. I can't get them to come down. How do I accept his apologies and let my guard down and forget what happened over the last 2 decades? I think there are more couples. So a great statistic to start this off with is Dr. John Gottman's research has showed that the average couple waits at on average, couples wait 6 years after experiencing something that makes them miserable in their relationship before seeking outside help. So this is not an uncommon experience to have maybe a partner with a short temper, or be dealing with big in-law issues, or be having big arguments about how to parent your kids, or dealing with finances, like having a huge argument where you insult each other and call each other names, or not having sex for a very, very long time. Like, these are all issues that couples ignore and ignore and ignore until the problem becomes so big and so painful that they can't ignore them anymore. And this is, I think, one of the only areas of life where people willfully ignore the pain that they're in. There's not. Sometimes we avoid the truth when it comes to our health, and we put things off. But I think overwhelmingly our relationships are the number one area in which we put off our pain and just kind of rely on hope that things will get better. If we wait long enough, maybe the situation will change itself. And that is not an effective strategy. So I want to empathize with this person, with this woman. Getting over decades of misbehavior from your partner is not an easy thing to do. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. It definitely takes time, and it takes a lot of grace on your part and willingness to be forgiving and understanding over that time. And it requires a lot of effort from your partner to show that they mean business, that the change isn't happening, that their change isn't just like, oh, I'm changing for 2 weeks or for 2 months, but it's a permanent change. And it can take a while for that realization to set in and for them to earn trust back. Changing human behavior is really difficult. It's not something like we are not accustomed to rapid change in life. It's not often that we experience 180-degree turns in our behavior and in our thinking. Those are rare experiences for most of us. And the other thing that kind of makes it doubly hard to forgive and move on is that, our partners are not perfect. And even if they're making a sincere effort to change their destructive behaviors, let's say they try really hard for 6 weeks and do really well, and then in that 7th week, they revert back to that old destructive behavior. It's like this familiar pair of nasty shoes that they put back on their feet, and they just slip back into what they've done for the last 20 years. It's easy to, as a partner of that person, to just assume that all of the progress that they've made is void. It doesn't count. We negate all of the good things that they've done, and we basically throw our hands in the air and we go, okay, my partner's never going to change. And so it's easy for us to kind of get poop colored glasses and put those on and only see our partner for the negative stuff that they bring to the relationship or for their mistakes or slip ups, and easy to overlook the progress that they make. So that is something that we need to be conscious of. And when you're experiencing, maybe when you have this realization that you've been experiencing a really painful issue and putting it off for 6 years, for 10 years, for 20 years, like this person who wrote this question, is almost 20 years that she's been dealing with a volatile partner. Another thing that makes this really hard is it requires you to kind of have a reckoning with yourself. You might be asking yourself questions like, hey, why did I tolerate that bad behavior for so long? Why didn't I stand up for myself? Why didn't I draw a line in the sand? Why didn't I say that this behavior wasn't okay? And we can kind of mess with our own heads, not just judging our partner for their slip ups and for their mistakes, but we can also be really hard on ourselves for not having caught this earlier and done something about it earlier, especially when we realize that we could do something about it. It's possible to do something about it. So all of those things make this issue of forgiving harmful, cruel, unkind behaviors that have lasted weeks, months, years, or even decades very, very difficult, especially if it's been going on for a really long time. Now, I want to make a really clear point right here at the very beginning, and this is something that I think the person who asked this question is conflating two ideas, two topics. And I want to clarify that right up front, that forgiving your partner is not the same as healing the relationship or restoring trust. So I think a lot of times we think that, hey, if I forgive my partner, then everything should be good in our relationship again. We should have lots of trust. We should, go right back into that playfulness. And if I'm still feeling icky, if I still have negative feelings towards my partner, then I didn't truly forgive him. And I just want to say that that is wrong. That there is a difference between forgiving your partner and healing the relationship, restoring trust. We talked in yesterday's live that was about my partner's gossiping behind my back. We talked a little bit about the importance of trust and how trust is one of those roots of the tree that kind of keeps your relationship, the tree that is your relationship, strong, firmly planted in the ground, healthy, full of nutrients. And if that trust withers, especially over 2 decades, you can't expect just like the act of forgiving your partner to restore that root back to full health. It's going to take some time and it's going to take some effort. So I want to, in the next few minutes, bust a few myths that we often believe about forgiveness, in addition to this one that forgiving your partner does not mean that trust is 100% restored or that your relationship needs to be healed. So it's very possible to forgive your partner and still have your relationship be unworkable, still have problems, still be a little bit reluctant to open up to them again. And we can talk a little bit about some of those myths about forgiveness that might help clear that up, and then maybe a couple of things that you can do to get to that place. So for that, I'm going to jump over to this slide right here. I put together, this is one of the slides taken out of my presentation that I did for the trust workshop about a month and a half ago. If you want to check that out, I think there's a link down below in the description at thetrustworkshop.com. And you can get access to the full course, but this is just one of the slides, and I want to walk through these seven myths about forgiveness that many of us often believe, and it prevents us from restoring our relationship and from like really truly forgiving, because we believe that forgiveness is something that it's not. So the first thing on the list is that forgiving does not mean you have to condone hurtful behavior. So forgiving somebody who does not mean, I'm going to reiterate that. Forgiving somebody does not mean that you have to condone what the person has done to you. It doesn't mean that you pretend that it never happened. It doesn't mean that you allow it to happen again in the future, but it does mean that you stop punishing your partner or holding what they did to you against them. So forgiveness doesn't mean you suddenly are okay with what happened. What it does mean is that you're not going to hold that over their head anymore. You're not going to bring it up in conversations to tell them what a terrible partner they've been to you. You're not going to weaponize their mistakes from the past. Forgiveness means I'm not going to punish you for the stuff that you've done to me in the past anymore. For example, if you make a mistake and your partner snaps at you and calls you an idiot, you can say, that is not okay with me. We do not call each other names. That's not okay in my marriage. In our marriage, I make mistakes. But it's never okay to call me a name, like especially a degrading name like that. So you can stand up for yourself. And if your partner apologizes, you can let the offense go by not punishing them for that in the future. And you don't have to constantly remind them. Remember that one time you called me an idiot? Remember that one time you were such a jerk to me? Using it as leverage to get what you want in future arguments. You can just love them and then make them feel safe and kind of hold this new boundary of no name calling. So you've stood up for yourself, you've expressed integrity, you've had self-integrity and self-respect, and you've set that line, and your partner now respects it, and you can let that thing go. Number 2, forgiving is just about moving on from hard stuff. So this is a myth. Part of forgiveness is moving on and leaving the hurt behind in the past, but it's impossible to move on from a difficult or hurtful situation unless you've healed it first. And that's what the trust workshop is all about. So just like a physical wound that doesn't properly heal, an emotional wound can fester and become infected and septic if you don't heal it. Couples who just try to shrug off these hurts or pick their battles or move on with life are couples who will find themselves withholding intimacy from each other. Physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, all of the intimacy they'll withhold from their partner. They withdraw from each other, and they stop having sex, they stop kissing, they stop holding hands, they stop having meaningful conversations, they stop going on date nights, they stop flirting with each other, and that all happens because a wound has gone unhealed, an emotional wound. They stop trusting each other with intimate details of their lives. They don't laugh at each other's jokes anymore. All of these things are evidence of an unhealed emotional wound. You fall out of love. Most people who fall out of love, it's typically because they've been hurt by their partner, and their partner, they don't know how to heal that hurt. They complain about walking on eggshells all the time. They feel more like roommates than lovers. These are symptoms of people who do not know how to heal each other of the emotional wounds they inflict on each other. If you want to avoid this negative outcome, you can't just move on when you're hurt. You have to go through a process. And that process is outlined in the Trust Workshop. There's a lot of other great places to get it. There's some good books. Mira Kirschenbaum wrote one called I Love You, But I Don't Trust You. Excellent read. So there's a lot of resources that you can turn to so that you can move forward, but simply just moving on after you've been hurt without going through that healing process, it's not going to be helpful for the relationship. So don't think that forgiveness is just moving on, because it's not. If you go through that forgiveness process, it makes it a lot easier to move on. The third myth is that forgiveness means you have to forget what happened. So this is something that this woman said in her question. The last sentence, I believe, said, how do I accept his apologies, let my guard down, and forget what happened over the last 2 decades? You're never going to forget what happened for the rest of your life. Those 2 decades are marred with your partner's misbehavior, with his unkind words, with his short temper. And you're not just going to wipe that from your memory. That's not how brains work. That's not how memories work. And that's not how relationships work. So forgiving does not mean forgetting. In some cases where the offense is harmful and dangerous to your safety, it's important to remember what happened so that you can protect yourself from being hurt unnecessarily in the future. But you should not keep a running tally of your partner's weaknesses and shortcomings. That's a big mistake that is easy to make. If they burn dinner, or if they take all the covers when you're asleep at night, or if they forget to pick up your kid from soccer practice one day, it doesn't benefit you to lord it over their heads, to hold it over their heads. The benefit of not forgetting is less about keeping a tally, and it's more about being able to watch for the warning signs like high emotions, raised voices, competitive situations. This is why we don't play Settlers of Catan in our family. My wife just is laughing in the other room. We avoid situations that would trigger us to put our marriage or put the other person in a position where they would say or do something that would hurt you. So there's certain things that we outlaw in our house because it just creates a negative environment, and that's why it's important to remember. So don't forget. Do not forget when your partner hurts you, but also once you forgive, don't constantly use your partner's mistakes and shortcomings as a bludgeon to punish them over and over and over again. So, okay, to summarize that, please forgive, but don't forget. Forgetting is not a part of forgiveness. Clear? Clear. Okay, the fourth myth. Forgiving your partner puts you in a one-up position. So forgiveness is not something that we talked about, one up and one down positions. That might have been yesterday as well. I can't remember. I'll see if I can find a link to it. But forgiveness is not something that you hold over your partner's head or use as leverage to get your way. I've briefly touched on this already. You don't forgive somebody and then use it to your advantage to get something that you want down the road. You don't want to be that person who says, hey, remember that one time that I let you off the hook? That's not forgiveness, that's manipulation. So forgiving your partner does not make you morally better or ethically a better person than them. It just makes you a good partner. And you shouldn't hold that over your head, or that negates the fact that you're a good partner. That's like using something good that you did to take advantage of somebody else, and that turns that good thing into a bad thing. So don't do that. The fifth myth is that forgiving is a natural process. So a lot of people think that forgiveness should come naturally to us, that if we wait long enough, that time heals all wounds. And that's not true. Time well spent heals all wounds. And forgiveness is not something that just magically distills upon you like the dews from heaven. That's not how it works. Forgiveness is a process that you learn by practicing it over and over again. It feels a lot like work. It feels uncomfortable. It feels unnatural, and that's totally okay. It's okay if forgiveness does not come naturally to you. If it doesn't come easily, that is, I think, a human experience. You just have to keep at it. You have to keep practicing, and you have to be willing to suck at it in order to be really good at it. Remember, your goal is just to get a little bit better every single day. So don't get discouraged if forgiveness does not come naturally to you. This is something that you have to, in order to experience it, you have to engage your will. You have to be, it's a conscious choice. And then we've got two more myths here. So myth number 6 is that resentment is a bad thing. Now, I am guilty of saying this, that resentment will kill your relationship. It'll kill your marriage. And that is partially true. The real truth is that resentment is an amazing warning signal that something's going on in your relationship that needs some healing, that needs some attention. So just like a check engine light in a car works to let you know there's something wrong with the engine, the check engine light is usually only fatal to the car if you don't find out what's wrong with your engine for months and months and months, and you just keep driving it as if nothing's wrong with it. Resentment in your marriage is like that check engine light. It's this built-in mechanism to help you protect your relationship. Without the feeling of resentment, you wouldn't be able to initiate the forgiveness process. So be grateful for your resentment when it shows up, and then do what's required to dismiss it, to get that check engine light turned off by healing each other of the wounds that are present. And if you don't know how to do that, once again, thetrustworkshop.com is a great place to go to get the whole process. I'll touch a little bit more on forgiveness in just a minute here after we get through with the 7th point. Point number 7 is the myth that you can feel your way back to trust. So this is an important myth to touch on because at some point forgiveness needs to be a conscious decision. I've mentioned this already. Feelings are unreliable. Sometimes we feel like we've forgiven somebody, and then we have some weird experience, like a bad dream, or you talk to a friend who was hurt the same way you were hurt, or you read a book or watch a movie, and all of the hurt and resentment that you felt in that moment comes flooding back in. And it's unfair to forgive somebody and then randomly rescind the forgiveness because you had a big flood of emotions or some weird dream that they cheated on you or something like that. Forgiveness, once again, is a conscious choice. It's your responsibility to manage your feelings so that they don't come out in a way that compromises the forgiveness that you've given your partner in the past. Once you forgive your partner, you let that stuff go, meaning specifically, you don't continue to hold it over their head. You got to find a way to not make them responsible for your emotions anymore, or make them repay the repent for a mistake that they've already paid the price for. So those are the 7 myths. Do you want some help? Okay. Those are the 7 myths of forgiveness that I think they're mistakes that we make when we're thinking about, I need to forgive my partner. And these things kind of creep in, and they corrupt the idea or the concept of what forgiveness actually is. And really, forgiveness is a pretty simple thing. When you forgive somebody, I've mentioned it already, essentially what you're doing is you're committing not to hold against them the wrongs that they committed to you. You're going to begin managing your own emotions and not holding them responsible for the emotions that you feel about the event that happened. So forgiveness is basically like, um, how do I put this? So that's not a good analogy. I think what I've said is probably about as clear as it's going to get. You promise not to punish your partner anymore for the wrongs that they've committed. Um, that does so just because you're not going to hold your partner. I'm going to go back to the question and hopefully help out with this. Um, Specifically, she says they had a big blowout fight. They've been having these really negative experiences over the last 20 years. They had a big blowout fight. He went to therapy. He came back, but she's holding her breath, wondering, despite his apologies, despite him saying he's changed, how do I trust him again? How do I trust that the change is for good? How do I let my defensive walls come down? And how do I kind of forget what's happened over the last 2 decades? So once you've forgiven your partner and basically let him off the hook for being a dick the last 20 years, the next step is giving your partner the ability to change and giving him a little bit of space. And like I said earlier, just because you forgive doesn't mean you've healed the relationship. It doesn't mean things are back to normal. It doesn't make what they did okay. It doesn't mean that your trust is magically restored. There can be a long road back to trust. And I would say a good, and this is not a universally true thing, but a good equation is that for as many years as things have been going poorly, should take about that many months to get back on track. And so if you've been, 18, 20 years not on a very positive streak, you should probably give yourself 18 to 20 months to get back on track. It's slow moving because trust is not easily restored. But the hope is that typically after about 9 to 12 months, you're going to see a pretty significant shift if your partner's consistent and if you show up with the right intent. It's up to you to set your partner up to, oh my gosh. It's up to you to set your partner up to succeed in this. It's up to you to manage your emotions, the negative emotions that you have over the past hurts and wounds that your partner has inflicted on you. But it's up to your partner also to do their part to restore trust. It's up to your partner to show you that they care, to show you that they're making an effort to change, to show you that they're worthy of your trust again. And your job in that process is to crack the door open and to affirm them for their efforts, to show them, to acknowledge them for the ways in which they're contributing meaningfully to the positive change in your relationship. So don't expect this to happen overnight. Give yourself some grace, give yourself a little bit of time, recognize that you're human, that these hurts don't just magically disappear. You're going to have some emotional scars left over. And you never also, I think Helen, what's her name? Oh my gosh. Harriet Lerner, I think, is the person who talked about this. She talks about how forgiveness is not something that you have to do 100%. And I think a lot of people have this idea that if I forgive, I have to let go of everything. And that's not true. Like you can 80% forgive your partner or 20% forgive your partner. You don't have to forgive them of everything, but you can forgive them of everything that you feel good about forgiving them for. And sometimes if you only forgive them 80%, that remaining 20%, maybe that remaining 20% is just a reminder that, hey, I'm never going to let my partner do this to me again. Maybe it's just, there are things that your partner does that are unforgivable, but you can still find a way to have a really great relationship while having that maybe 20% or 10% of like pain that is really hard to let go of. So there's also a question of, do you need to erase the entire chalkboard and start with a clean slate? I don't necessarily think that that's true. I think that you can get to that point over time, but maybe what you need to focus on right now is just like getting 10% of forgiveness to your partner. or forgiving them 30%, and just make some baby steps over the next couple of weeks and months so that you can start trusting your partner again without fully trusting them. It's not an all or nothing thing. And I love this idea that it's a gradual process, and we don't have to just magically flip a switch and go from complete darkness to complete illumination. So my hope is that that's a little bit helpful. Let's see. So DK asks, if the behavior returns, is it okay to reference what happened before, even if you gave him forgiveness? Absolutely. I don't think you punish them for it, but remember that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And so I would recommend if your partner raises their voice again, say, hey, we have a history of this. This is something I'm not okay with, and I'm going to enact the plan so that I don't get hurt further. That's a boundary. Whatever that plan is, you should probably have communicated it to your partner before then. But just because you've forgiven doesn't mean it's not something that you never talk about again. I actually think it's important to revisit the things that the past struggles that you have, and not just pretend they never happened. Do you want me to? Is she okay, honey? Okay. My wife blew out her back this week, and she cannot pick up the baby. So I'm probably going to end this really quick. But one thought to have or to keep in mind is that just because you have gone through this forgiveness process and you've let the kind of moved beyond the thing that hurt you, doesn't mean you never talk about this anymore. It's healthy to talk about things from the past, even painful things, and revisit them and make sure that things are still going well, that you're headed down the right track. Talk about how you handled it, what you did well when you handled those conversations, what you did poorly, how you could improve. Like there shouldn't be topics that are off limits in your relationship. And if there are, it should be an opportunity to kind of reflect and think about why is it that these topics are off limits, and what is it that we can do to better manage our emotions so that we can have conversations about these really difficult and important topics. So that's kind of where I stand on this forgiveness question. I hope that some of these 7 myths shed a little bit of clarity on what forgiveness is. And I hope that you don't put inhuman pressure on yourself to be better at letting go of things than you naturally are. How should we react if this is from YJ. How should we react if our partner just can't let it go? So maybe I'm not 100% sure what this means, but maybe you've done something in the past and your partner won't let it go. They keep bringing it up. They keep beating you up over it. So this is why I think the stuff that I teach in the trust workshop is so important, is because most people aren't taught how to heal from emotional wounds in a relationship. Forgiveness is part of the equation, but there's like apologizing, there's understanding how to actually the process to heal your partner, like what that looks like, or heal somebody who's hurting or who you've hurt. And unless you share that same language, and unless you share kind of that same framework, it's really difficult to get somebody who maybe has been taught their whole lives that you forgive, but you never forget. You hold grudges, you never let people in, you wall them off, you hold it over their head. Maybe they have a history of getting what they want from people by keeping score. And that's a hard thing. Like the families that we come from, the cultures that we come from, the way that we're raised, the people who had a big influence on us growing up, they could have left, decades worth of unworkable beliefs, of beliefs and concepts of ways to do things like forgive. Some people don't even believe in forgiveness. Some people don't believe in apologizing unless they've caused harm to somebody. I'm not one of those people. I'm the type of person, I think of myself in my relationship. I try to. I'm not successful at this very often, but the ideal I strive towards is I try to think of myself as the doctor, and I have all the tools and resources to heal my wife's emotional pains. And in my best of days, I do my best when she's hurting to give her what she needs to feel better, without making myself a victim, without prostrating myself on the ground and being like, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. I take responsibility for what's mine to be responsible for. And then I try to see things from her perspective and give her the the words and whatever she needs to feel better. And a lot of people don't look at their relationships that way. They look at relationships as, hey, if I did it on purpose, then I'll apologize, but otherwise you need to get over it. And I don't think that's a very productive way to look at things. But if your partner is stuck in that mindset and they haven't been offered a different framework, a different way of looking at the world, or maybe you're the only one who's offered it to them, and it sounds like you're trying to get yourself an easy out, then your partner's going to resist this. And so if you've got a partner who just won't let things go, if you have a partner who refuses to apologize, if you have a partner who holds grudges, the best thing that you can do is practice the principles that work to the best of your ability and open the door and invite them to maybe try on a new way of being that works better. And the best way to enlist your partner in doing something like that is to paint a vision of the future of your relationship that's something that they could be excited about. Like, I want to trust you and I want you to trust me. I want to have more sex. I want to flirt more. I want to laugh more together. I want to go on more dates and have more awesome memories. And in order to do that, I think there's some things that we could probably do better. And maybe talking about how we deal with conflict and how we treat each other afterwards would be a really great thing to explore. What do you say? Do you want to get on board? And maybe we can get more of the good stuff that you really, really want from our relationship if we can patch these things up. Sometimes the way that we approach these conversations is we just try to bury our partner and tell them all the things that they're doing wrong, all the things that they're doing to hurt us, and all the things that they need to fix so that we can have a better relationship. And if that's the way that you approach things, your partner's never going to get on board because they're just going to see themselves as a failure. And nobody wants to feel like a failure. Nobody wants to go participate in a workshop or go to therapy or go to like a marriage retreat or listen to a podcast if they think that the intention is to just make them the bad guy. So make your partner the hero and tell them how much it would mean to you for them to do this with you and what they would get out of it that would benefit them. And hopefully you can help your partner start to reframe some things. So the ideal here is to create partnership. The ideal here is to create a mutually positive experience in your marriage. You want you to be having really positive experiences and your partner to be having really positive experiences. You want to feel fulfillment. You want them to feel fulfillment. You want to feel pleasure. You want them to feel pleasure. You don't want one person or nobody in the relationship to be miserable all the time. And that would be a big fat L, or I guess maybe if we give it a grade, an F for marriage. So I'm hoping this gives you some actionable tips. If you have questions, please reach out. If you enjoyed this video, please just hit the subscribe button. 80% of the people who watch these videos are not subscribed, which means they're missing out on really awesome and valuable tools and principles and resources that I share on this channel on a regular basis. So please do your relationship a favor and hit the little subscribe button. And I've got additional resources down below in the description. I hope to see you again soon, and I hope you have an amazing weekend.